This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. My guest today is Jake Yocom-Piatt. Jake is a co-founder and project lead for the Decred cryptocurrency project. And prior to Decred, Jake funded and oversaw the creation of BTC Suite, an alternative full-node Bitcoin implementation. Jake is here to talk about the new privacy features that he and the team have implemented on the Decred protocol in the context of what Monero and Zcash are doing. Jake also talks about the mysterious Decred origin story, how it relates to the myth of Satoshi Nakamoto, and why Jake thinks Satoshi is a team of at least 3 people. We also talk about surveillance capitalism and much, much more. Jake is a fascinating guy with some very strong opinions, and I really enjoyed this one. Jake gets a bit technical, but stick with it because you want to hear what he has to say. Plus, we drop the Decred privacy flow hip-hop track, and you gotta hear this. The crypto rap trend has begun. Here we go. It's the Decred privacy flow rap episode. Hello, Jake.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
So, Jake, Decred is a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake, store of value asset for the digital age. Decred has strong governance, good security. You've got some new privacy features, which we'll talk about soon. So I think, Jake, an easy way to understand this is if Bitcoin was about being your own bank, Decred is about being your own bank, and yet you get to have a say in bank policy. So you've described Decred as the gamification of decision-making and reorganizing society around fairer games, which I think sounds amazing. In simple terms, what does that mean?
Well, in simple terms, the most direct way to describe Decred is that it's a community-directed digital currency. And the governance is built into it so that instead of, say, in the context of a pure proof of work cryptocurrency, there's an informal governance layer that sort of sits over top of the project that's actually very similar to how most open source software projects are run. We have actually integrated the governance into the project and technology itself. And the idea here is to make a superior long-term store of value. And the observation here is just that changing the rules of a system is a very delicate thing, as we can see with, say, Supreme Courts or elected officials and, parliaments in various countries throughout the world and in nation states. And the aim with Decred is really to become the first proper decentralized autonomous organization, which occupies a role similar to a nation state, just in a digital context. And we're trying to achieve that by really hitting on three topics: security in terms of the store of value, the adaptability of that store of value, and the sustainability of that store of value as a function of time. You can always build something great, but if it falls apart in just a few years, it isn't that great a store of value. And that's really what we're trying to do with Decred.
I want to touch briefly on the Decred origin story, Jake, as it's quite an interesting one. I suppose the short version is that you were involved in Bitcoin quite early and you ended up butting heads with the core developers there. And I know you went on to write a blog post in 2015 where you really told the world in no uncertain terms where you thought the weaknesses were in the Bitcoin project. You can tell the story, but so then you ended up working with an anonymous developer called Taco Time, who also went on to found Monero. And Taco Time's big idea was to add a governance system on top of a proof of work cryptocurrency. If you just pick up the story and weave those threads together to tell us how Decred began.
For sure. That's a very excellent and succinct summary that you just laid out there. So in early 2013, I'd been working on an online encrypted storage project that really wasn't going anywhere. And I thought Bitcoin was incredibly interesting. So we pivoted and we decided, we're going to make a full Bitcoin node from scratch in Go, which is an alternative programming language to C and C++. And we ran the ball. And what really drew me to Bitcoin in the first place, what got my attention, was how much fairer it was than the fiat financial system. If you've ever had a bank account, you know that your bank account can be frozen, you can be kicked out of the bank, you could end up on a list where it becomes incredibly difficult to either make transfers or hold a bank account. that observation led me to believe, wow, Bitcoin's a lot fairer than the fiat financial system. This is really cool. But as we started to work on BTC Suite, which was this alternative full node, Bitcoin implementation, we started to see that the Bitcoin community, despite Bitcoin being a really great technological innovation, was that this informal governance layer, which sat atop Bitcoin, which was effectively the Bitcoin core developers, and this was before Blockstream, mind you, and then ultimately, Blockstream showed up on the scene a little later, that was a very unfair system, which is that, I understand because I've worked in the open source software community for a while. When people show up and they're new, there's always a certain amount of, animosity or sort of, equilibrium establishment that occurs when somebody shows up and goes, hey, I want to participate, and maybe they don't want to participate the way you want them to participate, and so on. That happened with us, and it became clear pretty quickly that not only were we not welcomed, that a number of people were hostile to the work we were doing. So that made it clear to me that despite the underlying, ability to store and transmit value being very fair, and that having drawn me to Bitcoin in the first place, the decision-making process that feeds into that store of value and, the transmission and storage was very unfair. So that left a very bad taste in my mouth. And honestly, I didn't know where to quite go from there. And then I was approached in the summer of 2013 by another anonymous person who went by the handle _ingsoc. And they pressed me to look at Memcoin 2. So Memcoin 2 was a proposal for an alternative, alternative cryptocurrency that used a hybridized proof of work, proof of stake system, very, substantially similar to the one we ended up implementing in Decred. I was pressed to take up the mantle and run this project from basically the summer of 2013, and it took them 6 to 8 months to convince me to do that. I ended up looking around to see, well, what's everybody else doing? And after a few months of looking around, I became confident that, listen, no one else is doing this. And the next closest thing doesn't really sort of roll it all together. What really stood out to me about this that was interesting was there's proof of work, and then proof of stake sort of trumps. I know this is a very overloaded verb, but I'm speaking in the bridge term, using the bridge terminology, that proof of stake trumps proof of work, and you almost need that to happen because of the way application-specific integrated circuits, ASICs, are manufactured. It's a very centralized manufacturing process. If somebody knows what they're doing, they can get them made very, very cheaply and effectively take over proof of work. So I saw where the ship was headed, and I thought, wow, proof of stake is really where it's at. But pure proof of stake has problems. And similarly, pure proof of work has problems, but the hybrid is really valuable. And so I saw that. I wanted to run the ball there, and then I worked with Taco Time and Ingsoc for 2 years in private to bring everyone Decred, and that's sort of how it all ended up happening between February 2014 and February 2016.
Okay, thanks, Jake. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think what you guys are really trying to do is take the strengths of a proof of work coin such as Bitcoin and then improve on it, as you say, with the governance layer and the proof of stake model to mitigate against some of those weaknesses. And I'll put the blog post that you wrote in the show notes. It's a few years ago now, so it's slightly out of date, but it does really demonstrate what your thinking was at the time. 2 points to make from me, Jake. Firstly, the biggest compliment to Decred is the fact that Bitcoin maximalists, if there's two other projects that they support, and there's not many projects that the maximalists do support, but those two projects are, of course, Decred and Monero. So in some ways, that's got to be a big compliment, right?
It is. It's reassuring to have the confidence of people who feel so strongly about Bitcoin. It's pleasing to have their support because they're a fickle bunch and they're not easy to please. Something I always find myself a little conflicted about is that I have my own negative things to say about Bitcoin, but there's a lot of positive things to say. So it's always a little bit of a dance to interact with people who are serious maximalists, because some of the points I make can really rub them the wrong way.
Understood. All of us, we're out here in the crypto ecosystem trying to compete with each other to build the best crypto asset on the planet, and there's no problem with that. Jake, I want to go back to the origins just briefly, because I'm fascinated by this idea of creating a decentralized cryptocurrency protocol. I'm talking about Decred here, that is currently worth around $227 million, and there's no reason why that can't scale up to be billions of dollars eventually. eventually. So this guy, Taco Time, and the other anonymous person you mentioned, do you think this was a group or was it an individual? And what were their motives for being anonymous? And secondly, how does this tie in, or how is this different from the Satoshi Nakamoto Bitcoin origin story? And I know you've referred to Satoshi as you believe that Satoshi is a group, or so it's a pseudonym for a group. So can you just comment on origins of these projects, the anonymous teams? What do you think's really going on here?
I can quickly veer into the conspiracy theory bucket, but first off, my perception of Satoshi Nakamoto is that it's most certainly a pseudonym for a group of, at a minimum, 3 people. The software, there's an enormous amount of effort and energy that it takes to code things, to write academic papers, to have the big ideas, to create like a graphical user interface as opposed to back-end code. So my feeling is that the Satoshi group is 3 people minimum. How many it is, it's hard to say, but I think it would be 3 people would be safe to say. Regarding the people who ended up pressing me to run the ball with Decred, it's difficult for me, to claim with certainty exactly how many people or how large a group it was. I mean, what was presented to me was that it was 2 identities, but I have reason to believe that there were actually several people who contributed the code and the work that it took to get Decred launched. Now, in terms of people's motives, I can only do so much to project what my brain thinks onto these groups. There's several motives that could be present. I mean, I'll just throw a few of them out. One of them is that it's a bunch of cypherpunks who don't like the status quo. That's of course possible. I mean, another possibility is that it is some sort of facet of a nation state, one or more nation states trying to create what would be effectively the next world reserve currency. There's a lot of directions that I could go with this in terms of guessing what it is. It could be organized criminals, and this is just how they do business and they're trying to make it the status quo. It's hard to say exactly, where all of these threads came from and, where they all, began. But the impression I'm left with is that it really is ultimately about reorganizing society around fairer games. The idea being that banks aren't really very fair. If somebody doesn't like you at a bank, they can basically hit a button and all your money's gone. And that's obviously an incredibly unfair game. And the same thing applies to governance. Like, let's say, somebody wants to make a major consensus change. A very small handful of people, even currently, can make that happen in Bitcoin just by, pressing for it and gradually building support for it over time. And that is, in my opinion, sort of inherently unfair.
Sure. Really interesting thoughts there, Jake. And not wanting to lean too heavily towards the conspiracy side, but it does seem quite strange that Bitcoin, Monero, and Decred, which are 3 of the strongest and most respected cryptocurrency projects, and they all have a proof of work component, certainly, and they all have, similar anonymous backgrounds. So, I found that quite interesting. Jake, do you want to just maybe give a summary before we start to move in to the privacy stuff? Talk about the things that do make Decred unique in terms of how that governance process works and some of the developments that you've put in place that you feel support Decred's ability to evolve and be able to move forward in a way that Bitcoin struggles with.
Sure thing. There's really 3 pillars that Decred is based upon. So the first one is security, and security means the inability for people to double spend your funds or otherwise cause or double. What is it? Create a majority attack, which is effectively amounts to double spending, and also to make sure that people can't steal your funds outright. And so the way we approach that is the hybrid proof of work, proof of stake model makes it about 20 times more expensive than pure proof of work to run one of these majority attacks where double spending is a threat. So because of that added expense, the relative security of a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake system like Decred is substantially stronger than just the pure proof of work. And it aligns the incentives of miners and people who are mining and the stakeholders, and it does that to create long-term stability. So the people who hold the coins have their interests aligned with the miners. So for example, in a pure proof of work currency, you might have miners who just sell all their coins right away, but they still have an enormous amount of sovereignty in the context of that system. Whereas, by hybridizing, what we have is, if a miner chooses to sell all their coins, that's fine. They're welcome to do that. But if they choose to hold on to their coins and stake them, they can participate in the governance system. And we think that that's totally fair and reasonable. So it mixes things up, in that aspect. There's an adaptability that's built in, and the way that works is that our governance system has it not only is about validating blocks, it's also about voting. So there are on-chain votes that occur for, say, consensus changes, and because we can change our consensus rules via this voting process, we can make coherent changes to the consensus rules in a way that the vast majority of of the users or stakeholders would agree with. And then the ticketing system that works for on-chain consensus changes also works as a means to do off-chain funding decisions. So if let's say Andy comes up with some great idea, says, hey, I want to build this thing, it's going to cost $250,000. You can make a proposal for that, and then the stakeholders can vote using their tickets that they have on-chain on that proposal off-chain. The other thing that we focus on is sustainability, and it becomes a tragedy of the commons when no one is funding open source software. I've seen it several times. The OpenBSD project is a great example of this. There's some really great work done by open source projects, but when there's no money involved, it becomes very difficult to sustain the project. So we felt that it was important to build the funding into the project, and this allows the project to keep moving in the absence of external funding, whether it's donations or venture capital money. And I feel like in the case of Blockstream, the fact that they had to raise a lot of VC money to keep the ball rolling, it really puts a question mark on what are your motives and so on. And then in terms of other things that we're doing with the project, one of the more notable things that we're doing right now and is going to materialize very soon is our DEX project, our GCR DEX. Not so creatively named, but what it does is that the aim is to, in the same way that we've gamified timestamping, or Bitcoin gamified timestamping, we've gamified decision making. We are going to more fairly gamify the exchange process. So that's almost I'd probably say maybe 2 to 3 months out from a working prototype.
Nice. You've run through a lot of points really quickly and quite clearly, Jake, but I think if anyone wants to really dive into the details of the project, if you haven't before, the Decred website is decred.org, but we'll put that in the show notes, of course. Let's take a quick break, and then after we come back from the break, Jake, I want to talk about the new privacy features that you guys are implementing on the Decred protocol. I want to talk about surveillance capitalism, and I want to talk about the Decred privacy rap, which is a little 2-minute rap hip-hop snippet that you guys released, and that's surprisingly good. I think we'll have a listen after the break.
The Brave New Coin initial exchange offering is here. Having led the way with institutional-grade digital asset data, research, analysis, and portfolio management since 2014, the BNC IEO is live on liquid.com from October 18th. Unleash the power of BNC Pro. Research, chart, screen, analyze, and report, all on a single platform, unlocked with the BNC token. No monthly fees, and optimized for micro-transactions. A trusted team, working solutions, and real utility. The Brave New Coin IEO launches October 18th. Get verified, be ready, pre-register today at liquid.com.
Okay, and we're back. Now look, Jake, since Decred's launch in 2016, you guys have made substantial progress on the governance front, and Decred is a highly respected project for that. You're now making a pivot to privacy, and privacy has always been an important subsector in crypto assets, or the privacy coin narrative has been a strong one with Monero and Zcash particularly, and I think there's a growing recognition that privacy features or the ability to send private transactions are absolutely critical to the future of the crypto asset space. Firstly, can you tell us why privacy is important, Jake?
Privacy is important because other people knowing what you're doing, either currently or in the future or in the past, allows them to infer or guess, or in some cases know, what you're going to do in the future. So that if you lack privacy, people can, monitor you and go, okay, we've monitored Andy and Jake for a week. We know with 99% probability what they're going to do the next day and the day after that and the day after that. So privacy really comes down to, the information war, which is that the more someone knows about you, the more they can predict about you. And if people can predict what you're going to do, they can outmaneuver you. So let's say you're planning to buy a home and somebody knows that you're going to go buy home A. In theory, they could go and start making bids on home A, knowing that you're probably going to, bid on home A as well. So that this process of knowing what someone is doing and being able to predict what they're going to do is a very profitable thing it's a very profitable and a very powerful thing to be able to do. So privacy allows you to sort of draw a line in the sand and go, listen, you can figure some things out about me, but, we're going to restrict that information to something that, maybe I feel comfortable with, as opposed to, everything about me and can sort of, scan me and figure everything out, not only that I'm doing right now, but that I'm going to do.
Yes, Jake, we live in a world of surveillance capitalism where essentially, as you say, everyone is being data mined by the Silicon Valley tech giants, by the intelligence agencies, and by our phones and voice assistants. You'll be familiar with the privacy paradox, though. There's this growing sense that sovereign digital rights and sovereign financial privacy, these are really important to the world. And people, if you ask them, they want these things because the world just becomes a dark and dystopian place very quickly if we don't have it. And yet, people don't behave that way, do they?
Yeah, I think that what Silicon Valley and numerous nation-state governments have observed is that people people crave convenience. People are fundamentally lazy. You could be out in your backyard making butter from scratch, churning it, but nobody's doing that except, a handful of people. So this process of, giving people convenience in exchange, say stealing their personal information or mining their behavior, that's a very common trade-off. That's what I think is the trap here. It's definitely a tar baby. People think they're getting, oh, look, there's a baby over there that needs my help. And then you sort of go toward it and you think you're doing the right thing and the morals all line up. But when you get close and it's like, oh, wow, this was a trap. But most people don't have the attention span to necessarily, chase things down like this. And I think that, it does make privacy a difficult thing going forward, because if you had to describe surveillance capitalism, I would probably describe it as you're selling hammers at a loss, but you're going to make it up on volume because the hammers all have microphones and cameras in. And I feel like that's sort of the direction everything's going. And just sitting and idly letting it happen is really the wrong way to approach it, in my view.
I agree, Jake. Are you familiar with Edward Snowden's new book that he's put out? It's called Permanent Record.
Yeah, I was to understand that the content of the book was basically whatever Jake said 10 years ago was mostly right. And, I can sort of giggle when people who told me I was paranoid 10 years ago are like, wow, I guess this is really how it all went down. And, that's sort of where my familiarity ends, in the sense that I found Snowden's disclosures to be particularly entertaining myself, just from the sense of justification. It's like I've been telling people for years and years that everything we do is recorded, and they're like, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about. And then sure enough, somebody comes out and goes, no, it really is all recorded.
I agree. I think Snowden did the world a service by bringing those revelations to light. I think everyone knew in the back of their minds what was going on, but perhaps not to the extent. I found it quite entertaining this week when Snowden has come out and he's put this book out, and I'm not sure exactly what's happened, but I believe the US government has come down and they're trying to stop sales of the book. So now I think Snowden tweeted, this is good for Bitcoin, because he's going to make the book available for purchase using various cryptocurrencies. And did you see that Snowden came out quite strongly in support of Zcash, I think at the end of 2017, which was quite strange?
It's definitely interesting to see him, support Zcash. I think Zcash is they're a novel project. They're doing interesting work. They've got a lot of, academic brain power behind their ZK snark work. But for me, I've always been a little wary of it, just from the complexity standpoint and then the trusted setup phase. So I did find it a little odd that Snowden would be supportive of it, despite the trusted setup phase for me was kind of a showstopper.
Yes, I think he just was supportive of it in an abstract point of view, and that he saw that, they're using ZK snarks, and, so he's like, well, this is, taking cryptocurrencies, shielded transactions, taking it to the next level. But he probably wasn't aware that no one was using them, using the shielded transactions function at the time. The two big privacy coins are obviously Monero, XMR, and Zcash. And so we've just talked about Zcash a little. Could you tell us what Decred is doing on the privacy front and how you think how that compares to the two leading privacy coins?
Sure thing. I think what I'll start with strengths of those two coins, and then I'll get into Decred a little bit. Monero uses two things. It uses ring signatures and it uses confidential transactions. It takes those two techniques and combines them into what they refer to as ring CT. And so what ring signatures do is ring signatures create a signature that creates plausible deniability. It creates an anonymity within a transaction to say there are 11 sets of UTXOs, unspent transaction outputs, that could be funding this transaction, but only one of these sets is actually funding the transaction. So there's 11 anonymity in every one of these transactions. And that is great from a privacy standpoint because it creates this web of plausible deniability. But a major shortcoming of it is that if you can't know which of those 11 sets of UTXOs were spent, you can't prune all the other UTXOs that have already been spent. So that creates a sort of like a snapshotting problem. So that if you want to spend your Monero, you're going to need a full copy of that blockchain somewhere. It's great for privacy. It's very straightforward. It's sort of a single party computation approach to it. Now, Zcash takes a different approach, which is that instead of taking, say, two disparate pieces and combining them, what it does is it uses ZK snarks as sort of the big hammer of Zcash. And what that does is that takes the transaction amount, the transaction, the inputs to the transaction and the output, and takes all of that and then obfuscates all of that in one go. And it does this by using these ZK snarks, which are essentially arithmetic circuits. So you have a transaction, and then the transaction gets compiled down to an arithmetic circuit, which then gets reduced in size as much as possible. And then that is really what is a Zcash shielded transaction. So both of these approaches are very good. Zcash is good because it makes the anonymity set for each transaction the entire subset of shielded transactions that are currently in existence. And then Monero creates deniability about each transaction by saying it could be one of 11 of these inputs. Now, the trouble with both of these approaches is that by merit of the fact that you can't tell which inputs were consumed by these transactions and spent, you can't start throwing out the old parts of the blockchain to prune it back. So that's something that I view as a major constraint that I didn't want to bring into Decred. We could have easily gone the ring signature route, but then we pick up the problem that you can't prune the blockchain efficiently. Now, there's a little bit of an argument that we had with the Monero guys. They claim that they are pruning the blockchain, but their version of pruning is not the same as, sort of the conventional terminology. The conventional terminology of pruning in a blockchain context means you can throw out history of the blockchain and keep some, rolling subset of the blockchain and ignore the old history. You can't do that with Monero, but they do go to some other links to prune stuff out. So the way this feeds into what Decred does is that Decred tried to take three facets and really move along these. Keep it as simple as possible. So if I had to rate Monero has medium complexity, and then Zcash has medium high or high complexity. And I'm saying this based on the code and the cryptographic primitives used. We tried to keep it simple. We tried to be a little bit creative with how we applied it, and then we tried to make it and add the infrastructure in a way that could be adapted over time. So the decision we ended up making was to use this thing called CoinShuffle++, which is in a paper by Ruffing, Moreno Sanchez, and Kate from August 2016. And this allows you to create mixes, essentially it's a coin join, where even the server can't tell which of the outputs belong to which of the participants in the mix. And the reason we felt that this was a great approach is that coin shuffle and this dice mix process inside of the coin shuffle that's used are very straightforward from a cryptographic perspective. With ring signatures are a novel construct from around, I think, like 2000. And then confidential transactions is still relatively new. And then, ZK snarks is also relatively new. It's been developed over the past, 10 or 20 years in various forms. And so it went from ZKPs to ZK snarks. So in the case of Decred, what we did is we tried to keep the complexity low, use existing primitives, and use something that was already put out there. And then we tried to integrate it in a creative way. And what we did there is that because of our staking system that involves tickets, there's a ticket pool of 40,000 tickets. People have to buy these tickets, and then the tickets are called to vote, 5 every block, and that rolling sortition just keeps going. Because people have to continually buy these tickets, we figured, let's integrate the privacy process, our mixing process, with the governance process and with this ticketing. And that is what we did. So we took something that was simple and composed of simple pieces, and then integrated it in a novel way that can't really be replicated by other projects because they don't have the same ticket system we do that involves regular transactions and lots of volume. And then what we were really striving to do is to create something adaptable, because as soon as you put everything on chain, you can only evolve it very slowly. So for example, let's say we came up with this new post-quantum way to do this mixing. We can't just snap our fingers and put that on chain. There have to be consensus changes and a whole bunch of other things. Not to mention, post-quantum cryptography involving giant keys and taking up lots of space. So that's the approach we took, and we took that approach after observing how, we're having the luxury of observing how both Monero and Zcash decided to do their work.
So the key points there: Monero and Zcash, both high-quality privacy cryptocurrency projects pursuing different paths to the same destination. Decred you're taking your own path. Decred path is to try and keep things as straightforward and well understood and as simple as possible, so there's less to go wrong. The goal of Decred's privacy features are to be simple, adaptive, creative. Hey, Jake, I said we'd talk about the Decred privacy flow wrap snippet. What's the background here?
So the background there is that one of our contractors we work with, his name is Angelo. And Angelo has been involved in making music for, I don't know, probably 20 years now. He has his own record label. He's a electro house DJ, and he also is a producer, so he makes music. And he thought that as part of the privacy release, he would write some lyrics, work with a vocalist that he knows, and then he made the beats, and then had somebody record the rap. And I enjoyed it because I felt that it was nice, it was substantive, and it was well executed.
I enjoyed it too. I think it's a quality 2-minute piece of cryptocurrency hip hop. So, hey, I think we're going to play it. I'm going to play it right now, and then we'll go to a quick break, and then we come back. We'll take this home, Jake, with a wrap up on Decred, how you think Decred catches up with the Lindy effect of Bitcoin, and we'll finish with the crypto conversation hot takes. Take us out. Decred, privacy flow.
Ladies and gentlemen, pull up a seat. Allow me to introduce myself before you speak. It's Decred. You might not be familiar with the name, but who I am and what I do could revolutionize the game. I'm a coin, but not the kind you flip before a sport. I'm talking crypto. This currency's currently your resort to the privacy you seek. No code cracking the leaks. Self-governance. Intelligent minds call me elite. Sleep never. I'm working even when you take a vacate. Your stakes rise and check your account. That's called a payday. They say I'm too risky, but nothing like other coins. Just simple adaptability. Something that you should join. Not a single breach either. Full metal jacket, privacy so strong, Ed Snowden couldn't hack it. Couple hundred coded lines, no errors in my design. Off chain, unbreakable, I'm ahead of my time. Decred, and it's been a pleasure getting acquainted. Mine is staking, I work for the treasury to obtain it. Let's go.
Crypto, the asset class that doesn't sleep. The markets move quickly, with profits made and lost around the clock. It's a whirlwind, and you've got to keep up. You need enhanced tools that deliver timely data and accurate analytics so you can make informed decisions. You need BNC Pro, a customizable, institutional-grade suite of applications to help you manage your crypto investments all in one place. Get accurate market data, track your trades or custom holdings, and see profit and loss at a glance. Monitor any asset, trading pair, or exchange using Brave New Coin's trusted market data. Integrate BNC newsfeed and filter it to deliver only the news that matters to you. Never miss an opportunity, save time, and make better informed decisions. Finally, the all-in-one terminal experience you need to master this brave new asset class. BNC Pro, launching Q4 2019. Join the waitlist today at bravenewcoin.com.
Okay, we're back. And so, Jake, let's wrap this up. Talk to me. I think Decred is a really great project. But we've seen this happen before. You know, great projects don't always win. History is full of examples of better projects that don't go anywhere because you need users, you need market share, you need a brand, you need the network. Bitcoin, of course, as the world's #1 decentralized cryptocurrency, Bitcoin has all these things. Each year, the Lindy effect gets stronger for Bitcoin. What's the case for Decred?
It's easy to consider that whoever entered a space first to be the dominant player. But the pattern seems to be, you know, with technology of various flavors, that one technology will come first and it may be dominant for quite a while. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be dominant indefinitely. So, you know, let's say Betamax and VHS. VHS won out and then Betamax died. Now, the difference in that context is that, well, guess what? VHS died and got replaced by, digital media of various sorts. In terms of the Lindy effect and how I see it playing out with Decred, whether we can overcome or overtake the network from Bitcoin, it's a big question mark. I mean, I think one strength that Decred has over Bitcoin and a lot of other pure proof of work cryptocurrencies is that it evolves continuously so that we can do pretty much whatever we want, and we can do it in a way that the community has to explicitly agree upon, as opposed to going, well, we think this is what the community wants, so let's just fork in this change or fork in that change. I think that the process matters, and then the longevity matters. I mean, when it comes to, how has Bitcoin gotten to where it's gotten where it's gotten not just because of the, grassroots support. It's gotten where it's gotten because of massive investment from venture capitalists individually and through their venture capital outfits. In terms of overtaking Bitcoin, in the longer run, whether our network catches up, I think will be more of a question of evolution in our case, and then on the other side, sort of stagnation in the context of Bitcoin. I mean, if you look at Bitcoin, the only major consensus changes that have been made in the past, 3-4 years are the cluster of SegWit changes. And when you consider how much stuff has changed in Decred, we have a lot of stuff changing, and we have a lot more stuff in the pipeline that's going to be changing. So the extent of the change that can be manifested within these projects is going to become a factor, even if it isn't a major factor right now. So I feel like, we've got some positive things going for us, but whether we can overtake the network effect from other major projects, it's an open question.
Okay. Hey, good thoughts. Thank you, Jake. I like to finish with a round of rapid fire crypto hot takes. Are you up for it?
Sure thing.
All right. I want your hot takes, your hot fire. Take your best shot. Here we go. Jake from Decred, where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
I would say that I'm somewhere in the middle, and when it comes to maximalism, Bitcoin has a lot of things going for it that are positive, but it also has a lot of things that are not going for it. For example, Bitcoin maximalists calling people names and saying that anything that's not Bitcoin is a scam. And it's like, these are the same people who were saying that, Bitcoin was a scam back in 2012 or 2013. And then only later they bought $100 worth of Bitcoin, and now everything else is a scam. So, I feel like in that said, there are a lot of scams.
Absolutely. There are a lot of scams. Jake, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
That fairer games will prevail. Fairer games draw a crowd. There's a lot of unfair games that are used that underpin human society. And, if you've ever felt for a moment, hey, that doesn't seem fair. Like, why did the attractive guy get the raise and the promotion and not me? Or why did that other girl over there get the guy and not me? Our society is underpinned by rigged games, and I think that fair games are going to be something that persists and sort of grows within crypto.
Jake, if you were a member of the Satoshi team and you were redeploying the Bitcoin blockchain today, what's one key change you would make?
Probably be a little bit more explicit about one CPU, one vote in your white paper.
Nice. Jake, what is blockchain's killer app?
Blockchain's killer app is manifesting a fair game and tricking people into playing it.
I love it. Oh, Jake, Facebook's LibreCoin. I can't wait to hear what you've got to say here. Good or bad for the crypto ecosystem, and why?
Good because it would normalize cryptocurrency. Bad because it's Facebook, and Facebook is selling hammers at a loss and making them up on volume by spying on you through the hammer.
So accurate and so good. Jake, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You're an American, aren't you? So who do you think wins the American presidential election 2020?
I think that the Democratic candidates are pretty weak. I worry that the superdelegate system is going to shut down pretty much anybody who isn't Biden. Biden is not very mentally stable, or his brain seems to be going to mush, which is unfortunate if he's going to be picked as the Democratic candidate. I think that if the economy implodes, Trump could totally take it, or no, if it doesn't completely implode, Trump could totally take it. But if it does implode, I think there's a high probability that it would, that the Democrats would take it.
Okay. Hey, Jake, universal basic income as a fix for AI-induced automation. Is this a good idea? What do you think?
UBI makes no sense from a numerical standpoint. Very quickly, if you do let's pretend everybody in the United States got $1,000 a month of UBI. That comes out to some ridiculous amount of money, like $4 trillion. That's roughly the total gross amount of taxes collected in the United States each year. So the total amount of taxes collected would have to double for basic UBI to work. I think that whatever the solution is to AI and sort of, the increasing automation of life around us, or sort of, of work, whatever it is, it's not going to be UBI, at least as proposed by many other people. It just doesn't make numerical sense.
Jake, Bill Gates famously said, "We tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. What does the blockchain space look like in 10 years?
I think in 10 years, there's going to be a lot of dead bodies on the side of the road. And, as if there aren't already after the 2017 bull market, just straight up scams being run where people collect money to sell people washing machines that don't exist, that'll do their laundry for the rest of their lives on a blockchain. I think that there's going to be a lot more attrition in the space, and the sort of thing that we could end up with is something similar to the banking industry, where there's maybe a dozen or a few dozen major, blockchains, and a lot of the other sort of speculative ones that were just, games to raise money are dead on the side of the road.
Jake, William Gibson said, "The future is here, it's just not evenly distributed." What's an example of the future being here right now, but most people just don't know about it?
Well, an example of the future being here is, I think is Decred. So in the context of decision making, all nation state decision making is fundamentally soft decision making, or soft sovereignty. That is, you vote for somebody and hope that they do what they say they're going to do. You hope that the government implements it and runs the ball. So that's all soft sovereignty. Decred is probably the world's first example of hard sovereignty, where we wired our consensus rule changes to the votes in our system. And by doing that, however the people vote is exactly what happens. There's no nonsense or bullshit or, people pulling the rug out from under people and playing bait and switch games. It is hard sovereignty. So I think that the future is here, and it is completely accurate to say that it is not evenly distributed.
Jake, let's zoom out. What's the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I see more dystopia as a function of surveillance capitalism and the surveillance state. The surveillance state and surveillance capitalism are predicated upon this idea that you have to prove a negative. That is, I have to be able to prove that you're not a bad guy before I let you, buy a knife in the UK, or buy a gun in New Zealand, or open a bank account in the US, or, take all these actions. I think that approach to the world around us is fundamentally flawed and destined to fail. so that, you know, we're going to keep experiencing dystopia while people blindly pursue this, you know, this we got to prove a negative kind of approach to the world around us. But the real way to make everything run right is to align incentives with what we want to see happen. And hopefully that is the utopia that we can end up bringing about through alignment of incentives.
Fantastic. Jake, this has been a lot of fun. Final question for you. What is your favorite science fiction book, film, or show?
Book, film, or show? I don't know. I've always been a big fan of the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov, in the sense that it shows the, you know, humanity as this progression of like a big meta organism, and the fact that you know, this idea that the future can be predicted, and you know, what that means for, you know, for the meta organism that is humanity. And so that always kind of got my attention, despite the fact that I don't necessarily buy into the idea wholesale.
Superb. Gotta love the Foundation series, an absolute pillar of the sci-fi genre. Jake, fun to talk to you today. Thank you for coming on. Take us out. The microphone is yours. Tell the people where they can find you or where they can find Decred. Go for gold.
The revolution will not be centralized, but our chat services are. So if you're interested in chatting, hop on chat.decred.org. We do a lot of our communications real time in there. We're not big on forums or Reddit, but you know, that's the best way to get in touch with us. And we're always looking for new foot soldiers in the war on unfair games. So if that interests you, or that's got your attention, show up and we'll make it blow up.
So good. Thank you, Jake. Wow, that was super fun. Hey, thank you to Jake. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I really enjoyed talking to Jake. Links to Decred, etc., that is all in the show notes. Don't forget to go to bravenewcoin.com to learn all about BNC Pro, the new portfolio platform that Brave New Coin is releasing out of beta later this year. It is a very exciting platform. And look, if you're still listening, thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. Please do click the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you're an Apple user. And hey, go for gold. Even leave us a review. Would really appreciate it. Thanks again. We're out of here. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin